Recording.
Hey, this is Josh McQueen. Today we're discussing the topic JSTOR research discussion. So while researching background for my possible dissertation topic that related to George Washington and his restraint when it came to increasing power, I found a number of scholarly sources and journal articles through the platform JSTOR. And I have to admit, JSTOR has long been one of my favorite sites to find articles, so I very much enjoyed using it for this project. But from my research, I found 5 preliminary articles that I believe may be beneficial for me to use in my later dissertation research. The first article was entitled George Washington's Farewell Address. This wasn't the actual farewell address, but this article was written by Matthew Spalding, and it appeared in the Wilson Quarterly in the fall of 1996. Spalding, in this article about Washington's farewell address, broke down the significance of specific lines within the address, specifically emphasizing how the opening of the address set the tone for the whole document and proves Washington's character. I believe this breakdown of Washington's last relinquishment of power will be beneficial to my research to kind of bookend how he last stepped down and show that final relinquishment compared to his prior one. The next article was entitled George Washington, the President's House, and the Projection of Executive Power by Rubel Morales Vazquez. Washington's power and how it evolved the seat of the president is examined through the creation of the nation's capital. Morales Vazquez stated in that for Washington, in defending his idea of the federal city, particularly with regard to the location of the city, the look of the executive mansion, and the executive department offices, Washington helped give physical scope and definition to the separation of powers implied in the Constitution. So that article is going to reveal some of how the first president helped to actually shape the exact powers that the presidency had, and the founding era, how those powers were separated between the different branches. It's also emphasizing how much influence Washington had and how much influence he actually relinquished after his second term. The third article by Lindsay Chervinsky, entitled Washington and the Cabinet, the Unlikely Development of an Unintended Institution, focused on the establishment of George Washington's presidential cabinet and how Washington's use of his cabinet basically established these whole slew of positions within the executive branch. Chervinsky emphasizes how the Constitution does not contain a provision for the cabinet's establishment, but Washington, through his preference for kind of these advisors and his influence, established this advisory body that supported his presidency. And at the time when Americans were so afraid of unbridled power, like the power that King George III possessed, this expansion of executive authority revealed how influential Washington seemed to be, that he was able to do this. Harold Bradley's article is The Political Thinking of George Washington, and it's an older journal article. It was released in 1945, but this article by Harold Bradley attempted to reinvigorate the figure of Washington and reveal how Washington was at the center of political activity during the early years of the Republic. This article might be older, but it can actually help to provide some scholarly insight into how ideas of Washington have transitioned over time and some of the basics or basis of modern scholarship towards Washington. And then my final journal article, written by Brian Logan Byrne, is entitled George versus George versus George, Commander-in-Chief Power. This article actually compares 3 of the major Georges throughout American history, first one being actually King George III, the second George Washington, and the third is actually George W. Bush. The article is meant to examine how power evolved and how each George took ideas and expanded upon ideas or rejected ideas from previous Georges. The article for my research will be beneficial because it shows a comparison in power between Washington and King George III, emphasizing what was rejected from King George's rule and how Washington actually strengthened the executive branch. So yeah, these journal articles I think will be really helpful in my research as secondary sources, especially like working towards this dissertation topic if it's the one I end up doing. And I had a lot of fun finding them, and I'm most excited. George versus George was pretty interesting. So thank you so much, and I will see you next week.